You have been walking for some time now, and the world around you has begun to soften into that particular hour when day releases its hold and night has not yet fully arrived. The blue hour, some call it, when the sky holds onto the last whispers of daylight like a secret told in hushed tones. The air against your face is cool, not cold, but cool enough that you can feel it kissing your cheeks with each gentle breath of wind that moves through the ancient forest. And with each inhalation you take, you can taste the dampness of moss and earth and the faint sweetness of distant rain that fell hours ago, leaving everything jeweled with tiny droplets that catch what little light remains. Your boots meet the forest floor with a soft, rhythmic sound, not quite a footfall, but something gentler, a whisper of leather against moss and fallen leaves that have been softened by moisture and time into something almost like velvet beneath your feet. There is a pattern to your walking, a cadence that has settled into your body without you quite noticing when it began. Step, breathe, the rhythm of your movement synchronized with a quiet expansion and contraction of your lungs. And you find that this rhythm has become almost meditative, almost like a lullaby that your own body is singing to itself as you move deeper into the misty embrace of the trees. The mist itself is neither thick nor thin, but somewhere beautifully in between, moving in slow swirls and eddies around the dark trunks of oak and elm, curling around your ankles like a curious cat, rising and falling with an almost breathing quality of its own. When you pause for just a moment, and there is no hurry, no reason not to pause, you can see how the mist catches the fading light and transforms it into something luminous, something that glows with a soft blue-grey radiance that makes the entire forest feel as though it exists in some liminal space between the waking world and the realm of dreams. Your shoulders, which you now notice have been carrying some small tension, begin to release and soften as you continue your unhurried journey along the winding path. The path itself is barely more than a suggestion, a gentle parting of ferns and undergrowth that seems to have been walked by many travelers before you, though you cannot see or hear another soul, only yourself, the trees, the mist, and the growing darkness that wraps around everything like a soft blanket being drawn up over the world's shoulders at the end of a long day. Above you, through the canopy of leaves that rustle with the barest suggestion of movement, you can see fragments of the sky turning from pale blue to deeper indigo, and here and there a star has begun to prick through the veil, timid at first, then with growing confidence. Your breath forms small clouds in the cooling air, and you watch them dissipate into the larger mist with a sense of pleasant detachment, as though even your breath is becoming part of this quiet, dreaming landscape. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do except continue placing one foot in front of the other, feeling the gentle give of the moss beneath each step, hearing the soft chorus of evening birds settling into their roosts with final, drowsy calls that seem to say that all is well, that the day is done, that rest is coming. It is just as you round a bend in the path, where an old stone marker stands half covered in creeping ivy, that you first notice the change in the air, a subtle shift, a warmth that seems to emanate from somewhere ahead, and with it, the faintest trace of wood smoke, sweet and welcoming. The kind of smoke that speaks not of wildfire but of hearth fires carefully tended, of dry oak and apple wood burning in stone fireplaces, of comfort and shelter and the gathering of people in safe places as the night draws near. You continue forward, and the smell grows stronger, more definite, weaving through the mist like a golden thread drawing you onward. And then, quite suddenly but without any sense of surprise or alarm, you see it, light, spilling through the trees ahead, not the cold blue light of twilight but warm, amber light, the color of honey and candlelight and setting suns, pouring from windows that you can now begin to make out through the thinning trees. The path widens slightly, becomes more intentional, and the moss gives way to smooth stones set into the earth, worn by countless feet into gentle curves and hollows that guide your steps forward almost of their own accord. The building that emerges from the mist and the gathering darkness is neither large nor small but perfectly proportioned, as though it has grown from the forest floor as naturally as the trees themselves, its stone walls the color of aged honey, its steep roof shingled with what appears to be weathered slate that gleams faintly with moisture. Ivy climbs the walls in thick, ancient ropes, and the windows, there are perhaps 6 or 7 that you can see from here, glow with such a deep, golden warmth that you can almost feel the heat of whatever fires burn within, can almost hear the crackle and pop of seasoned wood surrendering itself to flame. As you draw nearer, walking now on a proper path of fitted stones that leads directly to the wide wooden door at the building's front, you can see more details emerging from the dimness. The hand-carved beams that support the small porch roof, dark with age and weather, the iron lanterns hanging on either side of the door, their flames protected by thick glass panes that magnify and multiply the light within, the window boxes beneath each glowing window, filled with herbs that release their fragrance into the cool evening air, lavender and rosemary and something else you cannot quite name, but that smells of earth and peace and home. The door itself is a masterwork of old carpentry, thick planks of oak bound with black iron bands and studded with square-headed nails that speak of an age when such things were made to last not merely years but generations. In the center of the door, at exactly the right height for your hand, hangs a knocker fashioned from iron in the shape of a sleeping fox, its tail curled around its body, its expression one of such contentment that you almost hesitate to disturb it. The metal is smooth and cool beneath your fingers when you finally reach out, worn by decades or perhaps centuries of hands lifting and letting it fall, and when you do raise it and let it drop, the sound it makes is not harsh but deep and resonant, a sound that seems to travel through the door and into the building beyond, announcing your arrival not with urgency but with a gentle, patient courtesy. For a moment, there is only the sound of your own breathing and the whisper of mist moving through the trees behind you, and then you hear footsteps inside, not hurried, but steady and purposeful, growing gradually louder, and you realize that your journey through the twilight forest has brought you exactly where you needed to be. The door opens inward with a sound that is barely a sound at all, just the softest whisper of well-oiled hinges and wood moving against wood, and with it comes such a wave of warmth and golden light and the most wonderful smells, bread baking somewhere deep within, herbs drying in bundles, the particular scent of beeswax candles and old wood and the sweet mustiness of ancient books, that you feel something in your chest loosen and release, some small knot of tension you had not even known you were carrying simply dissolving like sugar in warm tea. The figure who opened the door is someone you will come to think of as the innkeeper, though they do not immediately announce themselves as such, standing back with a gentle, welcoming gesture that invites you across the threshold without need for words. They are dressed in simple, comfortable clothing, soft wool in shades of moss green and warm brown, and their face, weathered and kind, breaks into a smile that reaches their eyes and makes the small lines at the corners deepen with what you somehow know is genuine pleasure at your arrival. They close the door behind you with that same careful quietness, shutting out the cool mist and the gathering night, and you hear the soft click of a latch falling into place, a sound that speaks of safety and shelter and the world outside being held at bay for however long you choose to remain within these walls. The lobby, for that is clearly where you find yourself, is a space that seems to have been designed with the sole purpose of making weary travelers feel immediately, completely at ease. The floor beneath your feet is made of wide planks of dark wood, polished by time and footsteps into a soft sheen that glows in the candlelight, and scattered across these planks are rugs in deep reds and golds and blues, their patterns intricate and hypnotic. They're all thick enough that you can feel the give of them even through your boots. The walls are panelled in more of that honey-coloured wood, and every surface seems to hold something worth looking at. An old map in a carved frame, its edges softened with age. A shelf of leather-bound books whose titles you cannot quite read in the flickering light. Brass hooks from which hang various items. A traveller's cloak, a walking stick worn smooth by use, a broad-brimmed hat. But it is the fireplace that draws your attention most strongly, as it draws your body across the room almost without your conscious intention. A massive structure of river stone that takes up nearly the entire far wall, and within it burns such a perfect fire that you cannot help but stop and simply stand before it, feeling the heat begin to seep into your clothes, into your skin, into your bones that had grown cooler than you realized during your walk through the evening forest. The flames move with a kind of languid grace, orange and gold and the deepest red at their hearts, and they make sounds, gentle pops and crackles, and sometimes a soft whoosh as a pocket of sap or air within a log surrenders to the heat. That might be the most soothing sounds you have ever heard. A conversation the fire is having with itself that requires no response from you, only your presence and your attention. The innkeeper has moved to a desk position near the fire, a beautiful piece of furniture made from the same dark wood as the floor, its surface covered with what appears to be soft leather in a green so deep it is almost black. Upon this surface rests a large book, bound in similar leather with brass corners and a brass clasp, and beside the book sits an inkwell made of thick glass that catches and holds the firelight like a captured sunset, and beside the inkwell, standing upright in a small brass holder, is a quill, not a modern pen but an actual quill, its feather the colour of chestnuts, its tip cut to a precise point that you can just see when the innkeeper picks it up with slow, practiced movements. They are gesturing to you now, inviting you closer, and you find yourself moving to the desk, your body feeling heavier than it did just moments ago, that pleasant kind of heaviness that comes when warmth begins to replace cold, when safety replaces vigilance, when the body understands that it can finally stop being quite so alert and can begin the process of settling into rest. The innkeeper opens the book. Its pages are thick and cream-colored, covered in what appears to be years' worth of handwritten entries in various scripts and inks, and they turn to a fresh page with a sound like a soft sigh, the whisper of quality paper against paper, and they dip the quill into the ink with such care that you can hear the faint sound of the nib entering the liquid, can see the small ripples that spread across the ink's dark surface. But before they begin to write, the innkeeper reaches beneath the desk and produces a cup, ceramic, handmade, glazed in swirls of cream and pale green, from which rises a thin trail of steam that carries with it the scent of chamomile and mint and honey and something else, something floral and sweet that you cannot quite identify but that makes you think of summer meadows and peaceful afternoons and the moments just before sleep. They place this cup on the desk within easy reach, and you understand that it is for you, that you are meant to hold it, to wrap your hands around its warmth, and when you do, when your fingers close around the ceramic and feel its heat seeping into your palms, you realize that your hands had grown cold without your noticing, and the contrast between the cold they had been and the warmth they are now becoming is so pleasant that you find yourself sighing aloud. A small sound of contentment that you had not intended to make, but that feels entirely appropriate here, in this place, at this moment. The innkeeper writes in the book now, the quill making soft scratching sounds against the paper, and you watch their hand move in graceful loops and lines, recording whatever it is that must be recorded. Your arrival, perhaps, or the fact of your presence, or simply the date and the hour, written in script so beautiful it is almost like watching someone draw rather than write. And while they write, you sip from the cup, the tea within it exactly the right temperature, hot enough to steam and spread its warmth down your throat and into your chest, but not so hot that you must wait or risk burning your tongue, and the flavors bloom across your palate like flowers opening to sunlight. The gentle, apple-like sweetness of chamomile, the cool clarity of mint, the rich depth of honey that has been stirred through until it has dissolved completely, leaving only its sweetness behind. When the innkeeper finishes writing, they look up at you with that same kind smile, and they gesture toward a chair positioned near the fire, and it is perhaps the most inviting chair you have ever seen, high-backed, upholstered in velvet the color of wine, with arms worn smooth by countless travelers who have sat here before you, and cushions that look so soft and yielding that you can already imagine how it will feel to sink into them. You move toward it, still holding the cup of tea, and as you lower yourself into the chair, it receives your weight with a kind of gentle embrace, the cushions adjusting to accommodate you perfectly, the high back supporting your head and neck at exactly the right angle, and suddenly you are aware of just how tired you are, how the walk through the forest took more out of you than you realized, how your muscles are now beginning to release and relax in ways they had not been able to while you were still moving, still alert, still making your way through the mist and the trees. The fire continues its gentle crackling conversation with itself, and the light it throws across the room moves in slow, hypnotic patterns across the walls and ceiling, shadows dancing with a rhythm that seems to match your breathing, which has itself grown slower, deeper, more regular. The innkeeper has returned the quill to its holder and closed the great book with a soft, satisfying sound, and they have moved away. You are not quite sure where, but you can hear them somewhere in the inn, perhaps in a room beyond, moving about with those same quiet, unhurried movements, and the sounds they make are somehow part of the overall music of this place. The soft footfalls, the gentle closing of a door, the distant clink of ceramic or glass being carefully placed on wood. You take another sip of tea, and then another, and you notice how the cup's warmth has begun to spread from your hands up your arms, how it seems to be radiating outward through your entire body, untying knots in your shoulders, smoothing away the small aches in your lower back, relaxing muscles in your neck that you had not even realized were tense. Your eyelids, which had felt perfectly normal just a short while ago, now feel pleasantly heavy, as though they have small, soft weights attached to them, weights that are gently encouraging them to lower, to close, to rest. And you do not fight this feeling because there is no reason to fight it, because fighting it would require effort and energy, and all of your effort and energy have been spent on your long walk through the twilight forest, and now there is nothing required of you, except to sit here in this perfect chair by this perfect fire in this perfect lobby where the air is warm and smells of beeswax and herbs and wood smoke, and where the shadows move in slow, peaceful rhythms, and where the only sounds are the gentle crackling of the fire and the distant, barely audible movements of the innkeeper going about their evening tasks. The cup in your hands is growing lighter as you drink, and eventually, though you cannot quite say when, because time has become something fluid and uncertain here, something that moves at its own pace without regard for clocks or schedules. You find that you have finished the tea, but the cup contains only the faintest residue of honey at its bottom, and you set it down on the small table beside your chair, a table whose surface is smooth and cool beneath your fingertips. And now, with nothing left to hold, your hands settle naturally onto the arms of the chair, and your head finds its place against the high back, and your legs stretch out before you toward the fire, and your eyes, those heavy, heavy eyes, begin to close of their own accord. Just for a moment, you tell yourself, just for a moment of rest before you do whatever comes next. But there is nothing that comes next. Not really, not now. There is only this, the warmth of the fire, the softness of the chair, the gentle darkness behind your closed eyelids, the sensation of your breathing growing slower and slower, deeper and deeper, matching itself to the rhythm of the flames, to the rhythm of the inn itself, which seems to breathe around you like a living thing, like a great, contented animal settling down for the night. And as you sit here, as the fire continues its ancient work of turning wood into light and warmth, as the shadows continue their slow dance across walls you can no longer see, you feel yourself drifting, floating, like a leaf on the surface of a quiet pond, and the last thing you are aware of is how safe you feel, how perfectly, completely safe, here in this place that exists somewhere between the waking world and sleep, this wayfarer's rest, this mist-veiled inn where travellers come when the day is done and the night has arrived, and all that remains is to surrender to the warmth and the darkness and the gentle, irresistible pull of dreams. And now, as you settle into the deepest corner of the velvet chair, the sounds of the inn begin to soften. The world outside is far away, lost in the mist and the moonlight. The only thing that remains is the warmth of the fire and the rhythmic, gentle pulse of the shadows on the wall. There is no need to stay awake for the rest of the night. You are safe. You are home. Let the embers carry you into a dreamless sleep.